Hello, welcome to Unit 12. Glad you're here. Happy to be talking about more grant writing. Today we're going to go through some of the highlights of the readings, and I want to draw your attention to a couple of really helpful conversations that the authors bring up in the text. And we'll also cover a little bit of what's going on here in class as we get closer and closer to the finish line. Hoping you're doing well with this class, not only that, but with all of your coursework this semester. And if you have any questions, as always, keep reaching out to me as we go along, especially with these big projects that you're working on as a group. These two final projects with the assessment piece, the strategic planning, and the grant writing. Those are big portions of your grade, and you've got instructions and kind of all the components there that you need to create it. But I know that questions come up as you go along, so please don't hesitate to reach out. For this week, with Unit 12, you're doing the Carson Fox text, lessons 10 through 15, as well as Funders Roundtable number 3. Graduate students are doing Powell and Bromley, chapter 27, on top of that. And then for your assignments, you've got the instructor lecture video here, group presentations, board posts, reading quiz, and then group 2 is doing the presentation for Unit 13. At this point, you and your group have already submitted the first draft of the strategic planning analysis report, and you did a memo too, which is for the upcoming draft of your grant proposal. So the grant proposal is due by 11:59 on 4/22, 2025. Right, it's at the end here of Unit 12. Um, Sorry, that should say the end of Unit 13, which I'm making that update right now. So it is on 4/22, and then it is at 11:59 p.m. and it's Unit 13. There was a typo there that I'm adjusting right now. The As we get close to this, please again reach out if you have questions. You've already got your memo in place, so you should have a clear idea of what you're doing as a team. And then shortly after that, you're going to deliver final versions of both the strategic planning analysis and the grant proposal. That's the final piece. I will get you feedback on each of these elements so that you know how to be able to finish it and do that across the finish line well. So, okay, let's go ahead and without any further ado, I want to take us over into our conversation for the day, which I'm really looking forward to. Let's go ahead and share my screen. All right. And we're going to bring up our presentation here. Just a moment. Present full screen. Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. So we are on Unit 12. We're continuing our conversation about grants and grant writing. And I want to kind of loosely follow some of the conversational points that they lay out for us in the chapters that we're reading in themselves. And kind of build on that as well with a little bit of added material from communication theory. So the first piece here is this question that happens at the beginning of the readings. I think this is chapter 10. And I thought this was so interesting. It was, what makes collaboration so difficult? And I'm curious what you think in answer to that. What makes collaboration so difficult? Think about it for a moment. Is it different personalities, different visions of how a project should go? Is it different understandings of time? When I was one of the first collaborative things I did in late high school, as I was kind of getting older and kind of understanding, like trying to do my own projects. I was in a band in late high school, and it was terrible, but we had a lot of fun, and we actually did a couple recordings. We worked really hard at it, but we had a drummer who was the kindest guy you'd ever meet. He was warm, he was personable. Everybody wanted to be his best friend. And he was pretty good at drums too. We really felt like we kind of got lucky in having this guy in the band. And yet he was terrible with time. The guy was would we'd have a band practice, and he would literally be an hour and a half late, or he would not just not show up. And we'd call, he'd apologize, and then he'd try to be there, and next time he'd be only 25 minutes late. And it was enough to drive me and our guitarist nearly crazy because it meant that the whole time we were waiting for this guy and we weren't able to get things done, and we're both kind of driven type A personalities. And so there's this sense of, wow, collaborating with this person is hard. And that happens when there's not clear communication, when there's different understandings of time. It can also happen because of polarization. And this is where I want to draw a little bit on communication theory. So if you've taken some other comm classes in our department at Duquesne, you may have come across the book Communication and Community, exploring implications of Martin Buber's dialogue. I think that's the whole title, by Ronald C. Arnett, who is former chair of the department. And this book is really good for a lot of reasons. It talks about dialogue and the work of Martin Buber, who was a Jewish philosopher, an activist who really sought to bring practically one of his big projects was bringing Palestinians and uh, Jewish people into conversation and to dialogue with one another to try to bring about peace. And this was in the 60s. And although not successful, as we've seen, it made some major headway, and some of the more important milestones on a journey to peace uh, were due to his kind of work with both sides. And he was highly respected by both Palestinians and Jewish people. And the um, the big thing that he does is he talks about dialogue and the importance of dialogue and coming to dialogic encounters, recognizing the humanness of the other person. And one of the things in this book that Dr. Arnett wrote uh, about Martin Buber, he points out that one of the big issues that is defining of our moment right now is polarization. Polarization is when, and you've probably heard this word a good bit in relation to our politics right now, but polarization is when people are on opposite ends of an issue. They have totally opposite beliefs, and they're not able to come together at all, right? They repel each other, and there's this belief that not only the other person who is different than me and thinks differently than me, not only are they wrong, but they're evil, right? And it's this movement where I'm not going to listen to anything they say. If they told me 2 + 2 is 4, then they must be wrong, right? It's like this belief that the other person can't be right because they're wrong. They're inherently wrong. And polarization, you can start to imagine how that would be a big problem in the world we live in if you're trying to collaborate with people, if you're trying to get some things done. And Dr. Arnett looks at dialogue and he says, okay, if we're going to move past polarization, the very first kind of small step is to be able to admit that I might be wrong. I can have strong convictions. I can have uh, deep, passionate feelings about what I'm doing or what I believe. But if I don't have even just a small fraction of a percent that's willing to be incorrect and willing to be wrong, to take the other person's position seriously when it contradicts with my own, then that leads to polarization. And so if we can come into these encounters with some humility and some ability to say, oh, you know what? I believe strongly in the way we do things, in the way we run our organization, but there's something for me to learn in difference. And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to um, put on some humility and learn from difference. That opens us up to being able to collaborate a little bit differently, right? And hopefully move towards a place of more and more dialogue. There's also this idea of minimal agreement. So Arnett looks at this world of polarized communication, and then he gets into conversations about postmodernity and meta-narrative collapse and all this stuff that kind of goes beyond the scope of this class for the moment. But it's really interesting if you ever want to read more of Arnett's work or Dr. Fritz's work, who's the current chair of our department. They both do some wonderful things on this. But this idea of minimal agreement is really important in a world where we don't have a lot we agree on, where we can't take agreement for granted because people come from so many different traditions, backgrounds, and polarized communication, right? What we can work towards is like islands of minimal agreement, where we can find people who believe something similar to us and build agreement on that, right? So maybe for the organization that I work with, uh, a really important piece of a Jesuit organization is justice, right? And looking at the idea of justice. And there are a lot of organizations out there that also have a strong emphasis on justice, even though they may not be Jesuit, they may not be Catholic, they may not even be faith-based, but they have a strong justice orientation. That could be a place of minimal agreement, excuse me, where I'm able to work with that other organization and forge a partnership. So minimal agreement allows room for being able to move forward. So find those places, those pockets. It's like you almost have to train your mind to begin to see these places where, oh, I have a lot that's different between my organization and this other person's organization. Maybe we're working on different things, but we both have this commitment to social justice. And if that's the case, that's something that we can build on, right? And that's really really good, a good place to start. In MOU, these are just some kind of notes here about collaborations. This is a memorandum of understanding. I don't know if you've worked with one of these before, but it's important when you're working with another organization, and it will be important in a grant process if you're collaborating with another organization that's not writing the grant or not a co-applicant of the grant, especially. But even with a co-applicant, you may want this. Is a memorandum of understanding, and it outlines the nature of the agreement that you have with that organization, what they're contributing, what you're contributing, and it spells out the whole process. It defines the nature of the relationship, and that's really important. Keeping lines of communication. So, as you're applying for this grant, as you're working together with these partners, continue to communicate, continue to give insight, and have conversations with these partners. Uh, they're nurtured through communication. These relationships are, and so it's important to keep those things going and strong. Looking on all of this, what has collaboration been like in your group during this class? I'm curious. Has it been easy? Has it been difficult? Has it been, have there been moments where you've overcome challenges together? I'm curious. And especially as you're working on these big projects, what is that like doing that in a team context? How would you improve upon it in the future? Some other things here to keep in mind. So, as you're evaluating your program and your proposal, and really the project that you are hoping to do out of the proposal, evaluation is a big component. We've talked a little bit about this, but I think that these chapters give a little bit of added nuance to that and help put this into practice, right? So, in case this hasn't been explicitly clear, when you are building your proposal, you should make it explicitly clear how you plan to evaluate the project, right? You should plan for evaluation at the start of the project. So as you're planning the project, you should also be planning how you're going to evaluate and assess that project. Have systems in place. And there are two different kinds of evaluation that the textbook points out that I think could be helpful. So there's process evaluation and outcome evaluation. Now, process evaluation focuses in and leans in towards like qualitative data, like interviews, um, having conversations with people, kind of the soft data that you get from understanding what people's experience of the uh, of the whole project is from their perspective, right? You can take all of this qualitative information, put it together, start to understand it. And this is often really helpful to be able to understand the process of the project, to be able to course correct in the middle, right? To be gathering data even while the project is still going. What do people think of it? How are they interacting with it? What is the perception in the community of the project that you're doing, and the perception of the people that you're serving, right? All of these things are really important, and they can help you um, monitor the kind of pulse and the heartbeat of the project that you're doing and be able to administer any care or course corrections that are needed. In the process, it will also be helpful for things like fundraising, things like um, being able to gather stories later with the right permissions and things like that. But then being able to, at the end, talk about some of these testimonials and things like that. But this really gives you a glimpse of what's happening with the process. The outcome evaluation is really often it happens after the project is over. Not fully, that's not a hard and fast rule, but often. And what you're looking at is outcomes, right? And so either at the end or at a significant milestone, you're looking at what did we say we were going to do? What did we actually do? And what is the difference between those two? And how do we quantify them with numbers, with quantitative numbers in terms of how many people attended this program? What kind of uh, like gap did we have in things? Was the return on the investment for the funders worth it, right? And not just the funders, but us too. We invested, our organization invested time, energy, money in this effort. Did we get the kind of outcomes we were looking for? If not, why? And and if we did, great. Like, what did we do right? How can we build on that, right? You're really trying to get to this place of being able to answer, how can we do better in the future? How can we improve upon what we did? And how do we do what we did right again? Yeah. So process evaluation versus outcome evaluation. And I don't like fully like separating these into totally different camps because there are quantitative outcome pieces that would be really helpful to know in the middle of a program too, right? Like how many people attended these events, tracking numbers so that you can course correct in the middle there is important as well. So in the proposal, also they talk about these things like linkages, dosage, negative findings, qualitative data, and these are all important things to also put in your proposal around the idea of um, of evaluating, right? So I think dosage was one that stood out to me as being really interested. And that's like how much programming per person, right? It's like what kind of things are you aiming to do and what kind of involvement level? Yeah. And include negative findings too. The in your reporting, there should be a structure for being able to report on things that go wrong and on things that don't go according to plan and how to deal with that. That should be something that's addressed in the proposal. Budget and sustainability. So we've talked a little bit about money, but there needs to be brutal honesty about money in your report. Don't stretch the truth. And I think this one was important too. Get help if you need it. If you need to go to a CPA or a person who has the ability to give some financial advice, invest in that because funders are going to be able to see the money and they're looking for the money on how it's being used, how realistic your proposal is, and some of those other pieces. And they're making sure everything adds up. So keep a really careful eye on that and make sure that you're reaching out for help as needed. And again, we've talked about this a little bit already, but estimate fairly. Estimate the real cost of what it's going to take to do this for your organization. Don't inflate it. That will get you in trouble, but so will underestimating. When you underestimate real costs that go into making a program run, then you're left with a really it's a resourcing gap because you're having to cover that yourself and you hadn't planned for that. So again, find this narrow ridge, this ground between uh, uh, exaggerating the need and underestimating the need and try to find that place where you're realistically assessing what this will cost in your proposal. So there needs to be a demonstration in your really it's throughout your proposal that this whole project is sustainable, that it won't just be even if it is maybe this is a good way of thinking about it. Even if it is a one-time project that doesn't go on forever and ever, it's a 6-month project, it ends. There needs to be a clear through line of why this project matters that sustains throughout your organization's work and the communities that you serve. And it needs to be spelled out for these funders that this is not just a flash in the pan, but this is something that has lasting impact and value, right? And you need, and then all these other things that are listed in the chapter about how to do that flow out of that, right? You need to show that other grant makers are interested in the program, that you have board backing and support, that the community is excited about these kinds of things, and maybe you have good volunteer buy-in to this. There's a lot of pieces here, but you're showing that this is meaningful and that other people think it's meaningful as well. Another way you can demonstrate some of these important pieces around sustainability is to demonstrate that maybe you're ahead of a trend. So this could be a new way of approaching homelessness, right? One of the big trends around houselessness and care for people who are going through houselessness has been to build tiny homes, right? If you've seen tiny homes on the internet, they're cute, they're adorable, they're tiny. I would bonk my head everywhere if I lived in one. But there are these housing solutions that are usually under 300 or 400 square feet. They're tiny. Sometimes they're on wheels, but they look like a small house, right? And there's been a lot of traction gained in the kind of houselessness nonprofit world around building tiny houses. And this really started to catch on maybe 5, 6 years ago. And at the time, I have a uncle who is in this space, and they started building a tiny house village on some property in Central Oregon. And they got funding for it, partly because it was ahead of the trend, right? People were starting to talk about it. There was a buzz about it. There was excitement, but not a lot of people were doing it yet. And they were some of the first to get their names in for grants and for possibilities, and they got funding because of that. Getting the job done. So showing your capability and capacity. So capability and capacity. Capability is we have the skills, we have the knowledge, we have the resourcing in line with your resourcing, right? To make this thing happen. Uh, Capacity means we have the time, we have the staffing, we have the ability to follow through on this, right? So you need to demonstrate capability and capacity, right? And you can do that by demonstrating your relevant history. What projects have you done in the past that have led your organization up to this? Um, Show me that you can do this. Tell me stories about successes or things you learned from failure. That's important too, right? Show things like website. You have a website that clearly tells your story, that looks professional and functional, right? It's not stuck back in the 90s. There, you have audits that have shown that your organization knows how to handle grant money and funding in the past and has done it responsibly and done it ethically and with good record keeping, right? You have board involvement, board members who are either known in the space or or have a record for being involved in organizations, and they're passionate about what you're doing. If that's the case, that's a good sign, right? So all of these pieces around getting the job done. The last piece I wanted to focus on is lesson 15, and it's really helpful. We're not going to go over all of that right now because I don't think that would be helpful in a PowerPoint or lecture style, but you should go back and you should read through this. It's got some really important notes about fund formatting a grant proposal and what should be involved with your cover letter, what kinds of things do and don't go in there. And it's really helpful. So go back to that as a reference and as a guide, especially as you're getting ready to write your own grant proposal as a group. All right. I hope this was helpful for you today. And I'm cheering for you as you keep working on this project, and reach out if you have any questions. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take care, everybody.